First contact gone wrong. The crystal spires of the Zarketh diplomatic vessel gleamed like frozen lightning against the void of space. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at perfect attention in the airlock chamber, her dress uniform crisp despite the sweat beading at her temples. As humanity's foremost xenobiologist and the first human to set foot on a Zarketh ship, she knew the weight of history pressed down on her shoulders. Final atmospheric check complete, Lieutenant, the AI's voice chimed through her earpiece. The Zarketh environment is within human tolerance, though gravity is approximately 1.3 times Earth standard. Sarah nodded, reviewing what little they knew about their hosts. The Zarketh had appeared at the edge of human space 3 months ago, their ships unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They were a crystalline-based species, their bodies composed of living mineral structures that grew and evolved over centuries. Initial communications had been cautiously optimistic, leading to this historic meeting. The airlock cycled, and Sarah stepped through into a corridor that seemed carved from a single massive diamond. Her boots clicked against the translucent floor, each step sending rainbow refractions dancing across the walls. Ahead, 3 Zarketh diplomats waited. They were beautiful in an alien way, towering figures of interlocking crystal segments that shifted and realigned with each movement. Light played through their bodies, creating complex patterns that Sarah suspected might be a form of communication. Their central cores pulsed with a soft blue radiance. "Greetings, representative of Earth," the central figure's translation crystal hummed. "I am First Facet KRX. We welcome you to mutual understanding." Sarah bowed slightly, careful to maintain eye contact with what she believed to be their sensory clusters. "The honor is ours, First Facet. Humanity looks forward to peaceful dialogue between our peoples." The meeting proceeded smoothly at first. Sarah found herself fascinated by the Zarketh's unique biology and their crystalline technology that seemed to blur the line between organic and artificial. They discussed trade possibilities, cultural exchange, and the sharing of scientific knowledge. Then came the incident that would change everything. As they toured the ship's bridge, Sarah's boot caught on a raised crystal formation. She stumbled, catching herself against a wall, but not before her knee twisted painfully. She winced but quickly straightened up, ready to apologize for her clumsiness. The reaction from the Zarketh was immediate and shocking. All 3 diplomats recoiled, their crystal bodies flashing brilliant reds and violets. The guards at the door raised their weapons, crystalline projectors that hummed with barely contained energy. "How?" First Facet KRX's translation crystal vibrated with what Sarah's trained ear recognized as horror. "How are you still standing? Your structural integrity was compromised. We observed the stress fractures form in your lower support column." Sarah blinked, understanding dawning. "You mean my knee? It's just a slight sprain. I'm fine." "Fine." The word seemed to cause the Zarketh physical distress. "When our kind sustains structural damage, we must immediately enter stasis for repair. Movement becomes impossible. The pain." "Oh," Sarah said, her scientific mind racing. "Human bodies are different. We can function through minor injuries. Pain is just a warning system, not a shutdown command." The Zarketh's color patterns became chaotic, their crystalline forms resonating with frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. They began communicating among themselves in rapid pulses of light that her translation software couldn't process. First Facet KRX turned back to her, its voice now carrying an edge of what might have been fear. "You are saying that humans can continue to operate while damaged? That you can ignore critical system warnings?" "Well, yes," Sarah replied carefully, noting how the guards' weapons were still raised. "Our bodies are remarkably adaptable. We can heal while remaining active, and our pain threshold is quite enough." KRX's crystal structure shattered the word. "You will be escorted back to your shuttle. This diplomatic exchange is terminated." Sarah's protests were ignored as she was quickly but firmly led back to the airlock. As she waited for the cycle to complete, she caught fragments of the Zarketh's internal communication through her earpiece: cannot risk, potential threat, no concept of structural integrity, continue regardless of damage. The shuttle ride back to her ship was tense. Sarah's mind whirled with implications. She had seen the fear in the Zarketh's reactions, fear of a species that could continue functioning while damaged, that didn't shut down from pain. A species that, in their crystalline perspective, ignored fundamental laws of structural integrity. As her shuttle docked with the human vessel, alarms began blaring. The Zarketh diplomatic ship was powering up its drives, breaking formation without warning. On the main screen, Sarah watched more ships emerge from faster-than-light travel, warships, their crystalline hulls bristling with weapons. Lieutenant Chen, her captain's voice was grave. What exactly happened over there? Sarah watched the Zarketh fleet growing larger, her sprained knee throbbing slightly. Sir, she said slowly, I think I just accidentally convinced an alien species that humans are indestructible monsters. The first shots were fired 3 hours later, and the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest strength might just be their ability to keep going when any reasonable species would have stopped. The pain threshold. 3 months into the Zarketh invasion, humanity learned just how deep the aliens' fear ran. Captain Marcus Rivera stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching holographic displays track the crystalline ships as they systematically attacked Earth's colonial worlds. His right arm, freshly released from a nanocast, ached with every movement, a souvenir from the Battle of Ganymede. Sir, incoming transmission from New Eden Colony, Lieutenant Sarah Chen's voice cut through the tactical chatter. After her disastrous first contact, she'd been reassigned as Earth's leading expert on Zarketh psychology. They're showing unusual retreat patterns. The holographic display shifted, showing crystal-hulled ships breaking off from an apparently successful assault. Marcus leaned forward, ignoring the protest from his healing arm. Show me the ground feed. The footage that appeared made even the hardened military commander pause. A squad of human marines, all visibly injured from the initial bombardment, had charged a Zarketh ground force. The crystalline aliens, despite their superior position in weaponry, had recoiled in what could only be described as terror when the humans refused to stop advancing despite their injuries. It's consistent with what we've learned about their psychology, Sarah explained, her voice excited. The Zarketh literally cannot comprehend continuing to function while damaged. Their entire society is built around perfect structural integrity. When they see us fighting while injured, we become their worst nightmare, Marcus finished, a plan beginning to form in his mind. Lieutenant, what would happen if we deliberately showcased this aspect of human physiology? Sarah's eyes widened. Psychological warfare. Sir, based on their reactions to even minor injuries, seeing humans purposefully fighting through serious wounds might be more than their collective psyche can handle. The next engagement proved their theory. When a platoon of walking wounded counterattacked a Zarketh landing force on Mars, the aliens retreated in complete disarray. Intercepted communications revealed their horror. The broken ones still advance. They violate all natural law. Their structural damage increases, yet they continue. Word spread through the ranks. Human soldiers began to wear their injuries like badges of honor, understanding how each bandage and scar sent shivers through the crystalline invaders. Medical technology shifted focus from complete healing to simply keeping fighters functional, a strategy that both conserved resources and maximized psychological impact. The turning point came during the defense of Europa Station. Private First Class Maya Patel had been manning a defense turret when Zarketh forces breached the perimeter. A crystal shard explosion had shattered her leg, but instead of retreating to medical, she'd splintered it with pieces of her own armor and kept fighting. The Zarketh command ship sensors had focused on her life signs, their confusion evident in their communications. To them, she should have been inert, waiting for repairs. Instead, she fought on, her vital signs somehow maintaining stability despite what their scans told them was catastrophic damage. When Maya's position was finally overrun, she stood on her broken leg, smiled at the advancing Zarketh troops, and said words that would become legendary. "You think this hurts? I've had worse paper cuts." The entire Zarketh assault force retreated, their crystalline forms resonating with frequencies that human scientists later identified as expressions of existential dread. They'd encountered something that defied their fundamental understanding of reality, a species that treated critical damage as an inconvenience. Back in Luna Base, Marcus watched the after-action reports with growing confidence. "They're starting to break," he observed, rubbing his healing arm. "Not just tactically, but psychologically. Every time they see us fight through injuries that would incapacitate them, it challenges their entire worldview." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying over holographic displays as she analyzed Zarketh communication patterns. Their entire language around human forces has shifted. They're not calling us enemies anymore, they're referring to us as the unbound ones or those who deny structure. There's a religious undertone to their fear now. "Then it's time," Marcus said, pulling up a classified operation file. "Lieutenant, I need you to help me put together a special task force. I want our most resilient veterans, ones who've demonstrated exceptional ability to function through injury." "Sir." Sarah looked up from her displays, realization dawning. "You're going to weaponize their fear." Marcus's grim smile was all the answer she needed. As they began planning what would become Operation Endurance, neither of them could have predicted just how thoroughly humanity's capacity for endurance would reshape galactic civilization. The Zarketh were about to learn that human adaptability wasn't just a quirk of biology, it was the product of millions of years of evolution, honed by countless challenges and hardships. And against a species that could literally walk off what they considered fatal damage, their crystalline perfection was about to shatter. Operation Endurance. The briefing room aboard Luna Base hummed with nervous energy as Captain Marcus Rivera addressed the 12 soldiers before him. Each had been handpicked for Operation Endurance, and each bore visible signs of past injuries, healed fractures, synthetic muscle grafts, regenerated tissue. To the Zarketh, they would look like walking impossibilities. "What we're about to attempt has never been done in military history," Marcus began, his own recently healed arm resting on the tactical display. "We're going to infiltrate the Zarketh command vessel not despite our injuries, but because of them." Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped forward, bringing up a holographic model of crystalline alien biology. The Zarketh command structure is based on perfect resonance between their leaders' crystal matrices. Break that resonance, break their will to fight. Our mission is to create cognitive dissonance on a scale that will shatter their entire combat doctrine. Maya Patel, her leg now reinforced with a lightweight exoskeleton, raised her hand. "So we're basically going to traumatize them with our existence?" "Precisely," Sarah nodded. "Your bodies, bearing evidence of injuries that would send them into stasis, will be our primary weapon. We've modified your combat suits to amplify their scanning frequencies, they won't be able to ignore what they consider impossible." The plan was audacious. The task force would deliberately allow themselves to be captured during a feigned attack on a Zarketh supply line. Once aboard their command ship, they would exploit the aliens' inability to comprehend human resilience. The operation launched 3 days later. The task force's ship, named Broken Arrow, with dark humor, engaged a Zarketh patrol. The aliens' response was predictable, their ships moved to capture rather than destroy, their curiosity about humans still warring with their fear. As planned, the human soldiers were brought aboard the massive crystalline command vessel. Their captors recoiled at the medical scans, their translucent bodies flickering with patterns of distress as they detected the numerous healed and healing injuries their prisoners carried. That's when Maya implemented Phase 2. She deliberately stumbled, falling hard on her exoskeleton-supported leg. The sound of metal and bone impacting crystal deck plates echoed through the chamber. To the Zarketha's horror, she stood up laughing. "Status report," one guard demanded through its translation crystal, its form trembling with barely contained panic. "Oh, this?" Maya gestured to her leg while walking in a circle. Just adding another story to tell. You should have seen what it looked like before the first time it broke. The guard's crystalline structure began to resonate at frequencies that made the human's teeth ache. Other task force members joined in, each moving in ways that their injuries should have made impossible by Zarketh standards, each demonstrating humanity's incredible ability to adapt and overcome physical damage. Sarah monitored the aliens' reactions through a concealed scanner. Their command structure is destabilizing, she whispered into the team's encrypted comms. Their horror at our condition is spreading through their resonance network. The psychological assault culminated when Marcus deliberately removed his arm brace, revealing the still healing fractures underneath. He approached the highest-ranking Zarketh present, moving his injured arm in a full range of motion that sent waves of visible distress through the alien's crystalline form. "We could do this forever," Marcus stated calmly. "Every injury makes us stronger. Every break teaches us something new. We are humanity, and we do not stop." The effect was devastating. The Zarketh commander's perfect crystal structure began to show fracture lines, not from physical damage, but from the sheer psychological strain of confronting beings that defied their most basic understanding of existence. Through the ship's crystal walls, they could see other Zarketh beginning to fracture as well, the cascading revelation of humanity's impossible nature spreading through their resonance network like a virus. Emergency stasis protocols activated throughout the ship as more and more Zarketh succumbed to the cognitive dissonance. Sarah's voice was triumphant in their comms. "It's working. Their entire command structure is collapsing. The resonance disruption is spreading to other ships through their quantum communication network." They watched as the mighty Zarketh command ship, pride of their invasion fleet, began to power down, its crew entering protective stasis to escape the psychological trauma of witnessing human resilience. Throughout the sector, other Zarketh vessels followed suit, their crystalline crews unable to process the fundamental challenge to their worldview. As emergency protocols transported the human task force back to their ship, Maya turned to Marcus. "Sir, did we just win a galactic war by being too stubborn to stay down?" Marcus watched the Zarketh fleet hanging motionless in space, its crews in self-imposed stasis. "Lieutenant Chen, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Operation Endurance was a success, but we may need xenopsychologists more than soldiers for what comes next." The real challenge would be helping the Zarketh recover from the realization that their definition of existence had been too rigid, too crystalline, to encompass the incredible adaptability of human life. The war was ending, but the revolution in galactic thought was just beginning. Breaking point. The crystalline halls of the Zarketh High Council chamber had never witnessed anything like this before. 2 months after Operation Endurance, Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood before the recovered Zarketh leadership, her presentation materials ready. Behind her, Captain Marcus Rivera and Maya Patel represented the human military presence, their healed injuries still visible, now serving as ambassadors rather than weapons. "Honorable Council," Sarah began, her voice carrying through the translation crystals. "We're here to bridge the gap between our species' understanding of existence itself." The council chamber pulsed with wary colors. First Facet Kirx, who had recovered from the initial diplomatic incident, spoke for the assembly. "Our civilization stands at a breaking point. Everything we believed about structural integrity, about the nature of conscious existence, has been challenged." Sarah activated a holographic display showing human medical data. "What you see as a breaking point, we see as an opportunity for growth. Human history is filled with moments where we adapted to what seemed impossible." The presentation continued, showing historical footage of human achievements, athletes performing with injuries, explorers surviving extreme conditions, accident survivors recovering and thriving. Each example sent ripples of disturbance through the crystalline audience, but now tinged with something new, fascination. A junior council member, its form still showing stress fractures from Operation Endurance, raised a resonating query. "How do you continue? When your structure is compromised, how do you maintain consciousness and purpose?" Maya stepped forward, her exoskeleton whirring softly. Because we're not defined by our structure, she explained. Every break, every injury, every challenge becomes part of who we are. We adapt. We evolve. We grow stronger at the broken places. The chamber erupted in crystalline harmonics as the Zarketh debated among themselves. Their language of light and resonance reflected their struggle to comprehend this fundamental shift in perspective. Marcus watched the debate with growing hope. The Zarketh were changing, their rigid worldview beginning to fracture, not in the destructive way they had feared, but in a way that allowed for new growth, new understanding. Sarah's team had discovered something remarkable during their research. The Zarketh's crystalline bodies were capable of adaptation, even regeneration in new forms. They had simply never conceived of it as possible, their cultural devotion to perfect structural integrity preventing them from exploring their own capacity for change. Your species' greatest strength, Sarah told the council, isn't your perfect structure. It's your potential for transformation. Like a crystal that can be reshaped, you have the capacity to become something new while retaining your essential nature. To demonstrate, she showed them microscopic scans of their own healing processes, places where crystal structures had reformed not into perfect replicas, but into stronger, more complex patterns. The revelation shook the council chamber. Colors cascaded through the crystalline forms of the assembled leaders as they processed this new understanding. Their fear of imperfection, of structural compromise, had been limiting their own evolution. First facet KIRX rose, its form now displaying subtle variations that would have been considered flaws months ago. Perhaps, it resonated, it is we who must learn to break, to change, to grow. Our war against humanity was based on fear of what we did not understand, not just about you, but about ourselves. The formal peace negotiations that followed were unprecedented in galactic history. The Zarketh began to explore their own capacity for adaptation, guided by human examples of resilience and growth. Research teams from both species worked together to understand the intersection of organic and crystalline life, leading to breakthroughs in medical science and materials engineering. Maya found herself working with young Zarketh who were learning to overcome their instinctive response to structural damage. Think of it like growing pains, she told them. Sometimes you have to break old patterns to create new ones. As the day's session concluded, Marcus and Sarah watched a group of Zarketh intentionally modify their crystal structures, experimenting with new forms and functions. The fear that had driven them to war was being transformed into scientific curiosity and cultural evolution. You know, Marcus mused, when we planned Operation Endurance, I never imagined it would end with us teaching an alien species how to embrace imperfection. Sarah smiled, updating her xenobiological notes. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from forcing others to break, but from showing them how to grow stronger when they do. The human capacity for endurance, which had terrified the Zarketh into war, was now becoming the foundation of a profound alliance between the species. The breaking point had become a turning point, proving once again that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy might be their ability to show others how to overcome their own limitations. The human factor. 5 years after the war's end, the Sol Zarketh Scientific Academy stood as a testament to how far both species had come. The massive structure, a fusion of human and crystalline architecture, orbited Earth's moon, its laboratories dedicated to understanding and advancing both species' potential. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, now Dr. Chen, stood at the observation deck, watching a remarkable sight, a young Zarketh deliberately modifying its crystal structure, adapting to lower gravity conditions without entering stasis. Beside her, Maya Patel, who now headed the Academy's Adaptive Physiology Department, nodded in approval. Remember when they thought we were monsters for walking on broken legs? Maya said, adjusting her now permanent exoskeleton, which she'd come to view as an enhancement rather than a medical necessity. Now they're teaching their children to embrace change. The transformation in Zarketh society had been profound. Their once rigid civilization had evolved into something far more dynamic. Crystal structures that would have once been considered flawed were now celebrated as signs of experience and adaptation. The species that had gone to war over fear of imperfection now studied human resilience as a model for their own evolution. Captain Marcus Rivera, recently promoted to admiral, joined them at the window. "The joint fleet launches next week," he announced. "First time we're sending human and Zarketh ships together to explore the deep frontier. First Facet KRX specifically requested crews with combat experience, says their structural adaptations make them uniquely qualified." Sarah smiled at the irony. The very injuries and healing that had once terrified the Zarketh were now considered valuable experience. The Academy's halls were filled with veterans of both species, sharing stories of recovery and adaptation, teaching the next generation that strength came in many forms. In one of the main research labs, a breakthrough project was underway. Human medical scientists and Zarketh crystal shapers had developed a revolutionary healing technique that combined human tissue regeneration with crystalline structural principles. The result was a hybrid therapy that could speed human recovery while helping Zarketh develop more adaptable forms. "We've come so far from that first diplomatic disaster," Sarah mused, watching a group of human and Zarketh students practicing new medical procedures together. "Who would have thought that our ability to function while broken would end up healing an entire civilization's psychological wounds?" The Academy's success had attracted attention from other spacefaring races. Species that had long viewed the Zarketh as unchangeable and humans as frighteningly resilient now saw both races as pioneers in understanding how strength could arise from adversity. Maya led them to the Academy's central chamber, where a unique monument stood, a crystalline structure intentionally grown with what the old Zarketh would have considered imperfections, each flaw marking a lesson learned, each irregularity celebrating the beauty of adaptation. Embedded within it were pieces of human medical technology, splints, braces, synthetic tissues, symbols of humanity's refusal to be limited by injury. "You know what the youngest Zarketh asked me yesterday?" Maya said, running her hand along the monument's surface. "They wanted to know if humans had always known we could keep going when we were damaged, or if we had to learn it too. I told them about human history, about how every limitation we've faced has pushed us to adapt, to find new ways forward." The monument caught the light from Earth rising over the lunar horizon, sending rainbow refractions through the chamber. Each color represented a different frequency in Zarketh communication, telling the story of two species learning to see strength in what they had once considered weakness. Admiral Rivera checked his comm display. "First Facet KIRX is requesting our presence at the Joint Fleet ceremony. Apparently, they've incorporated some human military traditions into their launch protocols." As they headed to the ceremony, Sarah reflected on how a simple diplomatic misunderstanding had led to war, then to understanding, and finally to a revolution in how two species viewed themselves and each other. The human factor, their stubborn resilience, their ability to function through adversity, hadn't just won a war. It had opened up new possibilities for what strength could mean across the galaxy. The Joint Fleet would carry that lesson to the stars, that true strength isn't about being unbreakable, but about how you adapt when broken. That endurance isn't about avoiding damage, but about growing stronger from it. That the most profound victories don't come from defeating an enemy, but from helping them overcome their own limitations. As human and Zarketh crews boarded their ships together, their differences no longer sparked fear but inspired innovation. They had learned that the universe was big enough for many kinds of strength, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from embracing what once seemed impossible. The human factor had changed everything, not through force of arms, but through the simple, profound demonstration that being broken didn't mean being defeated. And as the Joint Fleet prepared to launch into the unknown, they carried with them the most important lesson of all, that every breaking point could become a turning point, if you were brave enough to keep going.